Someone's asking how much power does the intake make? So this is something we've been talking about for a little while. Intakes themselves don't make power in a torque request car where the ECU is controlling how much power the engine makes. So the amount of power your engine makes is going to be determined by the ECU's programming, as well as the net effect of any restrictions on that. So what our intake allows is a tune that makes more boost, that flows more air through the motor. So our intake supports higher horsepower levels, and that's from the increased airflow over either the factory intake or a more restrictive intake. So your motor and tune will make all the power possible with this intake. With any turbo that's on the market currently, there will be no restriction. The most power that can be produced will be produced with this intake. Anything else we need to discuss?
There's 2 questions.
Oh, okay. Thought open air intakes or hot air intakes were no good due to the lack of shrouding. No, that's just totally false. This is not a hot air intake. So, there is hot air on this side of the intake. This side of the intake is cool when the hood is shut. The hood sits and follows the contours of this, the top of the intake. And then you have cold air coming in through the factory provisions and past the headlight and the radiator support. So this is not a open intake. I think APR has an intake where their air filter just sits in the engine compartment, like right next to the motor. That intake will ingest hot air for sure because there's just hot air all around it. We go through great efforts to shield the hot air and then direct cool air into this space. So yeah, no, it's not a hot air intake. But because it's not in a sealed box, the air filter is not shrouded. There's plenty of room around the air filter for airflow. What you end up getting is very high flow and access to all the cool air that's needed, especially when the car is moving. At idle, if you're sitting there for 5 minutes, sure, this is going to start ingesting hot engine compartment air. But it doesn't matter at idle. More than I just did. Okay. As far as intake air temp differences of the different intakes we offer, there is no significant difference on it. Like I said, all of our intakes manage the heat and work to shield the intake from direct heat from the engine. So all of our intakes are going to perform well from an intake air temp point of view. The real spot where your performance is going to make or break when it comes to intake air temps is your intercooler. That's it. The intercooler will deal with all the heat that you need it to. If you don't have a big enough intercooler, then that's where you're going to have the problem. The job of the intake is to flow lots of air and filter, contaminants out of your engine. Your piston rings don't need dust, between them and the cylinder wall. So, any other follow-ups?
I think people just expect when can we expect delivery?
Oh, they're in stock. I believe they're.
I don't think they've built them.
Okay.
We have built currently.
We have all parts in stock. They are being built.
Like behind this wall.
Yeah, they're building them right now. So, I think you'll definitely see if you place an order. We've sold quite a few already. So if you place an order, you should see that in the next week, ship in the next week or two. We do have limited inventory. We brought in as much as we could to release the product. But yeah, the sooner you buy, the sooner it ships. B9.5 S4 recently ordered the S34 Intake and noticed that the instructions list the coupler support bracket is optional. Can you talk a little about why you would not use the support bracket? Yeah, so we originally designed all of our S34 intakes with a support bracket, and we still do. They're not easy to install. They're hard to kind of get in there and align everything with the bracket. Once you do, and you do it right, the support bracket supports the air filter assembly. And so when the engine moves, the air filter doesn't like pull on the shroud, right? So the idea with the support bracket is the bracket supports the filter, not the carbon shroud. The carbon shroud is not designed to be a support system. It's designed to shield and insulate the intake from engine compartment heat. What we found though over time is we found that the intakes do perform well without the bracket because we were having complaints. We ran our own internal engineering testing on intakes here on company vehicles without support brackets, and we found that over long periods of time, everything held up and performed well, and the support shield was able to support the air filter assembly. So we made it optional so that people don't struggle with the installation. If you are installing it, I would recommend trying to make the support bracket work. If you want the best installation that will last the longest, that will have the most, least amount of wear, it's the best support. I think one thing that's always been important for me with our intakes, going back to I don't know what the Stratosphere intake, and then CTS knocked it off, and everyone knocked. They're just cheap, flimsy intakes. You can kind of go in there and grab it, and just everything's flopping around. The early Stratosphere USP Motorsports copied it too. It was known to just like wear through the fuel line and cause a fuel leak, and you can burn your car down because the intake's like moving around like a saw. So I always want our intakes to be solid when you grab them, and they move, but they don't shake or flop around. So that's the idea behind the bracket. They're still stable without the bracket, much more so than say the Stratosphere intake and all the knockoff variants that I'm referring to. But that's a little bit. You can totally make it work without. But I recommend spending a little bit of extra time if you have the patience and skill to make it fit.